Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We've got a very interesting daily market update lined up for you today. We are going to be looking at a clip from Michael Saylor that has came out over the weekend and him talking about what America should do in regards to a Bitcoin strategy. And that includes buying essentially a quarter of the network. Perhaps doing that via selling their gold reserves. And ultimately, through doing that, you sort of challenge the BRICS nations and the people that have bought gold. And I'm not seeing anything technically to suggest that gold's going down, by the way. But that would essentially put pressure on people that have tried to strategically reserve with gold. This video is very interesting for a number of reasons, one of which is it very much highlights actually how far we've came from Satoshi's initial vision. We'll be looking at the white paper and sort of reaffirming what that is. Also, we're going to be having this topic or this discussion when just the other day, the US ETFs alone, so ETFs enabled and held and custodied by some of the largest institutions in the world, essentially overtook Satoshi's wallet and are now the largest holders of Bitcoin, period. They're also the largest shareholders of the majority of the Bitcoin mining hardware that's out there and the mining companies that hold that hardware. So there's a real takeover by the United States. And I actually think what we're going to see with Trump's presidency is a furtherment of that. And I believe the role that Bitcoin is now taking in the world is actually one very contrary to Satoshi's initial vision that was given to us in the form of the white paper that came out on Halloween, trick or treat, 2008. And that was to put together a purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash, would allow online payments to be sent directly from one person to another without going through financial institutions. And it's very interesting when we dive into this clip of Michael Saylor, what he's proposing, and actually the vision that Satoshi put forward is no longer that one. And you've got to ask the question, who at this point is Bitcoin serving? There's no doubt in my mind that Bitcoin has, including myself, saved many people from the fiat systems because Bitcoin is just a short fiat trade, really and truly. But then again, so is everything. And it's going to be very interesting to see going into the future, Bitcoin is no threat as a currency anymore. And it's playing its role as a kind of investment instrument now. It's almost like putting your money into an index fund and you know over time it's going to be, you know, your money's going to grow on the back end of it. It's kind of playing that sort of a role, which isn't quite the liberating e-cash that it initially set out to be. So this is a very thought-provoking daily market update. Sometimes we like to just really get into something interesting that's actually fundamentally important to the entire space. And for me, as somebody that's been in this industry or certainly looked into it back in the days of Silk Road, I won't go too far down that rabbit hole. I'm sure we can do podcasts and maybe even get some of the old friends that I have back on the show to talk about what those days were like and some of the funny stories that came off the back end of it. Of course, none of which I partook in. It's just not my sort of cup of tea. But since sort of understanding this industry and then investing in it later on, et cetera, it's instead of going from this kind of, okay, we're going to get one over on the man here with this new system, actually the opposite is becoming the case. And distributed ledgers more broadly are going to find a bigger use case in actually enabling the traditional financial system than combating it. And there's a great opportunity there because some of these cryptos you can invest in. Some are off the top of my head, XRP, HBAR, XLM. You know, these are traditional sort of ISO cryptos that are likely going to do well. But let's stop rambling. Sometimes we like to just throw something very interesting into the mix and actually talk about something a little bit more philosophically important to the space. So I'm going to go ahead and mute my mic. We're going to get into this clip of Michael Saylor, and then we'll show actually that what he's saying isn't that far out of the realms of reality and what other people have called for. Could become a possibility. That's a very bullish outlook. And then we'll talk about actually more philosophically, this is not the liberating technology or tool that it was initially set out to be, and there's been a real hijacking of that vision in the pursuit of making money. And I'm all for that, by the way, guys. I'm just saying the irony of some of what some people are saying out there as it relates to Bitcoin being this kind of liberating, libertarian technology that's going to liberate the world. It's far beyond the realms of reality. And I actually think there's a whole more sinister plot to all of this. Let's get into this clip of Michael Saylor.
So the very simple idea is buy 20 or 25% of the Bitcoin network on behalf of the U.S. government, catalyze the development of that world reserve capital network, and then let all the Chinese and the Russians and the foreigners sell all their other assets and buy Bitcoin, and then the money flows into the United States. If you want to put a great twist on it, dump your gold, sell all the U.S. gold, buy Bitcoin, then the trade is free because you could buy 5 million Bitcoin for the cost of the gold. You will demonetize the entire gold asset class, and our enemies hold gold in their banks, so their assets would go to zero. Our assets would go to $100 trillion, and we would control the world's reserve capital network as well as the world's reserve currency network.
As usual, you're painting a grand and vivid picture, Michael, with this kind of stuff.
Now that clip really got me thinking about a lot of things. First of all, let's not be negative about Michael Saylor. And a mere mortal like myself cannot be negative about a man who has taken a ghost company, it never recovered from the dot-com crash, to the best performing asset of the S&P 500 for essentially arbitraging Bitcoin. You have to be real with yourself sometimes and say, how can I throw any shade upon Michael Saylor when he's done something nothing short of magnificent? I mean, truly, he's done something nothing short of magnificent in regards to, in the world of finance, he's kind of really, got many things very right. So this isn't a dig at Michael Saylor, even if I disagree with a lot of what he says. There's two aspects to this. One is it's extremely bullish from the point of view that actually the United States government, which already hold Bitcoin, might be about to get into it in a big way and actually use it to strategically further their role globally in the ways Michael Saylor spoke about. That is very bullish. That's a super bullish case, and we know some form of that is likely going to become true. Just to throw this in there, just the other day, the US Treasury calls Bitcoin digital gold. Jerome Powell said another thing. We did a video on it earlier this week. There likely is going to be also, what he said there was a selling of some of the gold to put into Bitcoin. And that does a number of things. It sort of destabilizes other countries from a sort of gold volatility point of view. The largest country in the world is starting to abandon them. There can also be issues with that. A strategic reserve is strategically placed. You want some exposure to multiple things because you never know what's going to happen. So I wouldn't advise selling all of the golds, Bitcoin, the gold the United States holds for Bitcoin. I do often question, so I believe there's a place for gold and silver, more as an insurance than anything. They really are, in my opinion, the currencies of last resort, and history has proven that throughout time, or a value system of last resort. But in an increasingly digital world, what role do they play other than a sort of, what's the word? Not institutional, industrial role. So what Michael Saylor is saying actually isn't too far out in the realms of reality. And that's very, very bullish. Not Senator Warren. I'm trying to think who it was. There's been lots of Cynthia Lummis, lots of people like that coming out and talking about actually the idea of this. We already know that the largest institutions in the world right now hold more Bitcoin than anybody, or the largest institutions within America specifically hold more Bitcoin than anybody. And there's a very bullish takeaway for all of this that's likely going to see those targets that we have for Bitcoin get met. Think about it. The largest superpower in the world now looking to buy and utilize Bitcoin. It's an amazingly bullish fundamental story. We know the large institutions are already doing that. And there's a bigger trade, I think, in all of this in regards to miners, which will outperform Bitcoin. Join the Patreon, guys. I've got one miner. It's still cheap, in my opinion. We think is going to do unbelievable things. And I actually think miners are also positioned that this is part of what Michael Saylor is saying is going to become a reality. I think the other really interesting takeaway from all this is the fact that there's something more than Satoshi's vision, and I've always questioned the origins of Satoshi now being enabled, and that is that this idea of a peer-to-peer electronic cash is no longer Bitcoin's purpose. I have my own beliefs that actually there was a hijacking of that concept with the block wars and the civil war that took place with Bitcoin, where you ultimately had the forking of the chain into Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Free, or as Roger Ver would say, Bitcoin Core, but I wouldn't use that. I think that's quite an annoying terminology. Free Roger Ver, by the way. Somebody, I mean, you've only got to listen to the guy to understand that his heart's in the right place, even if he does have differing opinions to the kind of prevailing view of Bitcoin. But with them not choosing to up the block size, they essentially meant that Bitcoin would never scale as a layer 1. 1 megabyte, I think, was put in, and that was originally put in place due to a DDoS attack when Bitcoin's network was very small. Bitcoin was around about £1 back in 2010 by Satoshi himself, and they never upped it from that. Or there were slight up increases, but never anything that would see it be able to scale to become a peer-to-peer cash. So Bitcoin's initial vision, and a lot of these people like Saylor praise Satoshi, is actually they're kind of doing the opposite of it and actually institutionalizing and governmentizing, that's not a word, Bitcoin at this point, which is not, it's no longer this liberating technology in the sense that we can use it without financial, I mean, we can use it without financial incumbents, but institutional incumbents, but that's not the path, and that's not the push for adoption. The push for adoption is really that it's something you can buy, it will go up in value and protect you from the fiat systems, which is a part of Satoshi's vision, but not the enabling, sort of liberating point that Satoshi sort of raised. And actually, it's very ironic, isn't it, that Bitcoin is now the best performing ETF ever, held by the majority of Bitcoin held by the largest institutions within the US, financial institutions as well, which Satoshi's vision very much says this is kind of who we're going against. And now we're likely going to see the US government. It's all very bullish for Bitcoin, by the way, but it's not quite the initial vision for it. And I also believe that actually not that many people really care about the initial vision for Bitcoin. They just want to make money, and you can't hate people for that, you know. But it is interesting. I think Michael Saylor, you know, at the end of the day, he's a salesman. He's somebody that's done very well. He's got his own horse to back, and he's going to put forward this case, and he would be the kind of first to do that with a company, which is, you've got to give him credit for. It's very interesting, isn't it? Are the United States going to start selling their gold for Bitcoin? I actually think there's a possibility of that. I also think this idea of a strategic reserve is something that's absolutely going to happen, and they are going to incorporate Bitcoin as a global financial instrument to further their role globally, and that's a massively bullish use case. And they're also going to do it with their own currency through actually championing the dollar as a currency. If Bitcoin was any threat to the dollar, they'd have eliminated it by now, or certainly like it wouldn't be where it is today. And we know Trump's very zealous for the dollar. And actually, can Bitcoin combat the likes of BRICS, which Trump has already very much waged war on them using an alternative currency system, potentially, whilst also hindering the dollar. So this video really was a daily market update. We touched a little bit on price and where we're at, but really it's to sort of ask people to look a little bit deeper under the hood of everything going on and show this unbelievably bullish narrative that we've now got for Bitcoin, but also showcase the dangers of us falling further into those traditional financial institutions kind of traps with Bitcoin than without it. Because if you think about it, you're just starting out in Bitcoin today. Okay, it's very expensive. Bitcoin, of course, is divisible, and you can stack stats, but who's the real beneficiary of Bitcoin's price going up at this point? Institutions, governments, not citizens, which was perhaps the initial intent. That's it from me, guys. I'm going to live and leave you. A bit of a thought-provoking one. Let me know if you like this slightly different daily market update. Wasn't a lot of news to cover over the past 24 hours, but we wanted to get an update all the same. Have fun getting rich, guys. I'll see you all in the next one.